Good afternoon. Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the chamber and watching on the webcast to today's meeting of the audit panel. Can we just make sure that we've got phones turned to silent, do not disturb, what have you, so they don't interrupt the meeting. Can I start by asking our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
No apologies received.
Excellent. Before we begin, if I could just welcome all of our guests who will be joining us during today's meeting. We have Peter Sebastian, who's the Assistant Director of Financial Services at the GLA. We have David Esling, who's the Head of Audit Assurance and Risk Management at MOPAC. We have Mark Woodley, who's the Group Audit Lead of MOPAC. Those three here in the chamber. And then joining remotely, we have David McCollum, who's the Head of New Deal for Young People at the GLA. And we have Toby Gould, who is the Head of Response Capabilities, Training and Readiness for the London Resilience Unit. Welcome, everyone. Quick bit of housekeeping. Can I just ask the panel to note the recommendations set out at item 2 on declarations of interest and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December to be signed by me as a correct record? And can I ask the panel to note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings? Great. So that brings us to our first substantive item, which is our internal audit reports. So we're joined in the chamber by David Esling and Mark Woodley from MOPAC. David, if we proceed as we usually do, if you want to introduce the overall report, and then we'll work through the various appendices.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will take the progress report as read, but just to highlight the reports that we're bringing today are the New Deal for Young People, London Resilience Migration Team, the Royal Docs follow-up report, and also the External Relations follow-up report. And then it's the report then states the actions and the reports that are currently in progress, and those will come to the next audit panel. Probably just focus on the counter-fraud aspects of this report, work that's been undertaken by our counter-fraud unit in the last quarter. Probably focus on the adult skills and employment. I think we talked about this at the last panel, and this was where a grant recipient had failed to comply with the conditions of funding. They hadn't provided adequate evidence of delivery and hadn't maintained valid centre approval for registration. That amounted to a $910,000 amount that's due for recovery, and that's with GLA Finance currently. But as a subset of that, the counter-fraud team are working with the DfE and the Public Sector Fraud Authority to review and assess the evidence that's been gathered as part of this, and the DfE has also been defrauded by the same grant recipient, so that we're working with those organisations, as it says there, to refer that and evidence it and then refer it to the police. National Fraud Initiative work, as you see, there's a number of matches that have been made, and we've looked into those. However, from the initial evidence, from the initial matches, we found that there's no duplicate payments, and therefore there's no recoveries being made. So, in a sense, that's a good news story, because the systems within the GLA Finance are working as prescribed. Just a couple of things there. GLA Community Counter-Fraud Forum, and that's, as it says, it's going to be held on 24th of March. And that's where we work with the GLA family to share either fraud activity that's occurred within those organisations or generally across the public sector. So it's a very useful forum to attend, and gives us some good insight when we're obviously doing the actual audits themselves, or may even give our counter-fraud team some areas that they may wish to investigate based on some of the latest fraud issues that are mentioned during that. I think we've talked about this at previous panels about the training the counter-fraud unit have undertaken in the grant funding, and that's been very, very successful. A good response from all those previous training activities, and as it mentions there, there's another further 3 training days going to be provided to the GLA on that. So those are good insight into what's required really for monitoring and maintaining grant funding and looking at any potential fraud areas. The final bit was a piece of legal advice that we've received regarding specifics on the Data Protection Act, and that was regarding the GLA's ability to share and request personal data. Basically, as it says, in summary, the data can be shared and requested. However, this is on a voluntary basis. So just to say that the organisations and GLA family we work with are likely to share that. However, they do have the option not to, should they wish. So unfortunately, we can't share that advice or the data as we would want to and request that through other public sector organisations, because it's, as it says, on a voluntary basis. It just becomes slightly more difficult. So that's the update paper. Happy to take any questions. Obviously, we'll be talking on the substantive reports, as I mentioned. But as I say, willing to take any questions on that, or happy to move on to the next item, which is obviously the draft audit plan for 26-27.
I was just going to ask a quick question on the obviously the training for staff involved in grant funding, or counter fraud training. Are we seeing? Obviously, it's good that people go on it. It's good that we have this program, and it's good that the feedback is generally positive. But ultimately, the measurable is: are we seeing some sort of impact on blocking fraudulent applications?
It's probably a bit too early to say, because it only really started last year. However, what we have seen is the response at those training sessions and the interest, and they're usually a couple of hours, and my counter fraud manager says that he can't get away because it actually peaks some areas that an activity that they're taking away. So I'd like to see that the control basis and the control frameworks within the grant thing will improve, and also it's more a case of those individuals dealing with grants will be cognizant of the fraud issues, and it will just help that process. But as any demonstrable change, it's probably too early to say, but I'll take that away and I'll ask him if he can quantify that and can make that point.
That's a positive in itself, that people are going, I hadn't thought about that. That's really good. And it's kind of getting cogs turning and building awareness, which, if nothing else, is valuable. That's exactly
what's happening. So he comes away feeling quite upbeat for once.
Brilliant. Kripesh.
On the same issue, to be honest, so I just noted it talks about the 3 further dates agreed up to March 2026. So is this in addition to what's been provided already?
Yes, these are further training sessions. Yes.
Okay. So what has been provided to date? What's the training involved so far?
So I'd have to probably bring that back next time, the actual course, the nature of the training, but it literally is looking at the grants system and the potential areas of fraud that are fairly standard within that area. I mean, we've touched on some of the previously in some of the actual frauds that I've brought to the panel previously, such as boot camps, without talking out of turn, but it's where a grant or monies are given to an organisation. Are they spending that money as they should? Are there some checks or spot checks undertaken by the grant authority? So it's raising those issues as part of that training. And as I said, it's in some areas it's either peaked understanding of what's required, they take away, or it's just reinforcing what they should be doing and the impact that can have by just some fairly simple maintenance of the control process.
Okay, sure. And has there been any impact or change in what's been delivered since obviously the change in IT system, because they're working from a TfL system rather than GLA now?
So yes, in the grant side, the new IT system, yes, has had its change. Again, we haven't seen any. I couldn't say there's been any significant change in the impact of that yet, but that's something I can take away and bring back to the panel in future updates. I don't know if Peter's got any points on that. No, but we grants just to as you know, in my updates every time, it's often grant funding is an area of issue. It's something we're really focused on. And now, as you can see through the training session, the GLA are also focused on that, along with a number of the other organisations that we provide audit services for. So it's an area that we're really honing in on and trying to get the organisations that we, as I say, provide audit services for to look into and obviously look at those control frameworks that are in place for grants. But I will bring back, the output of those training sessions, maybe some of the questions that have been raised as part of that might be useful for the panel to be to hear.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Actually, just might be a question for you, actually, Peter. One of the things we've spoken about, well, I've spoken about with Faye previously, was about sort of tracking grants and just, keeping tabs on all the money that we're granting to various places. Various bits of the GLA, of course, have different grant awarding programs. I know that's something that she's aware of. Is that I think there's a program to try and capture all of that in one system. Is that underway? Do we have a progress update on that?
Firstly, just thank you for letting me attend in Faye's stead. Yes, there is a programme, but in terms of a detailed update, I'd be happy to bring that back because at this stage I don't have as much information as I think you'd like on that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. I should have said hello and welcome to you. I don't think you've been here before, so welcome.
No, thank you.
I don't think, are there any other questions on that? No, in that case, we want to move on to internal audit plan, which I think should be relatively straightforward.
Okay, yeah, thank you. As on an annual basis, we the team go out and speak to senior members of the GLA team to look at the key risk areas. Obviously, we base the plan on looking at previous audit work that we've undertaken, looking at those risk areas as we're required by standards to undertake a risk-based approach to the audit planning process, and also applying and conforming with the new global internal audit standards. So this plan is a product of those conversations, and as you will see, it gives a detailed area of the area for review, the quarter, and also the allocated days, and it covers the sort of spectrum of the GLA sort of areas of activity that are undertaken. Happy to take any questions on any of that, but I think it's fairly, as it I'd like to say it always is fairly comprehensive in its coverage, and also gives obviously updates on follow-up reviews that we either brought this year, so that move into next year's plan as well.
Yep,
but as I say, happy to take any questions on that.
Don't see any questions on that. No, so we move on. Yep. Oh, sorry, question's been brought to light. James.
Just in the plan, I think only 3 days have been allocated for a follow-up review into cyber security arrangements. I was just wondering whether you think that's adequate, given obviously the major changes we've had in terms of IT in recent months.
So, as you will see, we tend to give 3 days for each follow-up review. So some may take a little less, and some. So that was a cyber security review that was undertaken. And what we will do, and taking your points on, we look at the recommendations that came from the original review as part of that, but we will then look at any changes that have taken place. So that's a very good question. I would probably state that may take more days than that. But again, that's something that we assess at the time of the review.
So there is space for that flexibility to come in?
There is. So as you'll see, all follow-up reviews, as I say, take 3 days, but obviously some may take less, some take more, so we have to rationalise and take that into account. But and we also have contingency should any review not necessarily overrun, but require further input from audit. So yeah, no, but that's a good. Thank you. That's a good question, and we'll. As we all know, cybersecurity is an area that's of concern for all organisations at the moment. So, yeah, we'll make sure that the days required will be given to that review.
That's good to hear. That's reassuring. Thank you.
That's a good point, because we're not just a generic organisation with general concern. Obviously, we had a specific issue which, to some extent, is still echoing, I think, in some small ways. So I now don't think there are any other questions. So that takes us, I think, to a new deal for young people. So, David, if you want to kick off.
I'll hand over to Mark.
Mark.
Yes, okay, right. So, new deal for young people. We concluded a reasonable assurance, and our findings were as follows. The strategic framework is clear and well established, supported by the mentoring quality framework. Grant assessment processes are robust. Financial due diligence, safeguarding policy checks and mentoring quality framework indicators were all reviewed at the point of the award of grants. Ongoing programme oversight is operating effectively with quarterly monitoring, performance reporting and collaboration between programme teams, finance and oversight boards. Financial controls are also operating effectively with accurate tracking of spend and clear escalation of variances. The main weaknesses relate to safeguarding assurance, Although organisations provide evidence of safeguarding procedures at the grant award, the programme did not routinely request or review DBS certification evidence throughout the life of the grant. Also, training plans were not also being consistently evidenced. As a result of these findings, we recommended strengthening assurance by asking grantees to maintain and provide evidence of up-to-date DBS checks, the updating of safeguarding policies annually, and confirming that training plans are up to date. We've also recommended that the GLA as a whole considers aligning grant requirements with its internal policy of 3-year DBS rechecks alongside the sample checking of DBS records. So those are key findings there. I think David's here to
He is, yes. We're joined online.
As well.
Thank you, Mark. So
Okay,
David
thanks.
McCollum's joining us online. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that, David, if we have any questions. Okay, I think that was a mimed no. That's all right.
I'm so sorry, I'm having... It's not how I would like to present, so apologies for the sound. No, I think it's right.
Yeah, I think we are having some sound issues. I was just going to ask, I think well, did anybody else have any? Yeah, Alex.
Just on DBS checks, is this us asking, obviously, above and beyond the statutory requirements, or is this, supersedes that?
Well, DBS checks don't have a time period, expiry period per se, so they're taken as a point. It's good practice. We've sort of had a look at other organisations, and good practice is normally sort of have a 3-year process. And also the GLA's own internal safeguarding policy has a 3-year recheck process written into it. So the internal policy has the 3 years. We think as good practice, they should put that into that for, not just for this one in particular, but other grants as well that involve, safeguarding and child protection. So that's why we thought it was a good practice to bring that in.
No, yeah. Thank you. And then my second question relating to, and obviously in your sort of verbal update, and in the report you referenced that you did do due diligence on the front end of the awarding of grants. But then if I'm looking at the key risks, and so the third point, checks were not carried out on evidence to ensure training plans for the mentors were updated in a timely manner to confirm the required training was completed and support provided as part of monitoring throughout the lifetime of the programme. And that's more, so I appreciate the checking of the front end, but obviously you've highlighted the lifetime of the scheme and not getting adequate checks. And obviously that then has an overspill into the grant and money allocated, and making sure that the training was conducted properly. So in terms of where we are now, are we in a better place?
Yeah, I think that the part of the issue with that was it was not consistent. So for some it had been done, for others it hadn't been done. So it wasn't across the board problem. As I say, I'm not sure if David can help pick up on some of the training side of things, hopefully.
Yeah, of course, thank you. And I think I would say contextually, the New Deal for Young People mission is its delivery grants are very close to an end now. So 31st of March, final grants. This is a reflection on the work delivered, but also a learning opportunity for the future programs. We, through the New Deal, had a really robust response to safeguarding up front, as recognised, and really enhanced deep dive into due diligence about it. We follow the GLA safeguarding policy on the check should occur. So there was a balance between the deliverer of provision, so those working with young people, and the grant funder, and then we sit on the grant funder side. So we follow the GLA policy, but I recognise there's definitely an opportunity to learn and explore sort of deeper and ongoing reflection around safeguarding, particularly around annual checks around training plans and safeguarding policies. And I think that's something that's implementable in a structure. Just for reassurance, we do have quarterly ongoing conversations with grant funders. A lot involved in ensuring that grant payments are overpaid with supply and safety and safeguarding is the big driver behind it.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, David, we got every other word of that, at least me, but I get the gist of what you've said, but don't worry. No, that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Apologies, I can type into the chat if you helpful as well.
See, that's a bit better. Maybe if you speak a bit closer into whatever you're using, that might be helpful.
I was going to suggest two things, actually. One, being a bit closer definitely helped. And secondly, if you were to speak a little bit slower, that probably would give people time to process the previous word. I think that's perhaps our best way of navigating the technical issue. Kripesh, you had a question.
Yeah, it's on the DBS checks as well. So just a question on whether the audit identified who at the GLA was responsible for checking and whether they were kept up to date by the grantees and what discussions were had with them.
Well, sorry, did David want to cut in? Sorry.
Would you like me to
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Can you hear me?
That's not working. So
I think it might be that it got worse, not better.
Yeah.
So I think if Mark's
got an answer,
if you do know the answer, then you could probably help us
I'll
out.
try to answer, yeah. I think the issue was it was at sort of at the initial stage, the checks were taking place, but then there's a quarterly update process as well. So there was some additional checking, but it was more in a case of not doing a sample check of the DBS records that individuals had. It was more of a sort of discussion thing and say whether there'd been any new mentors onboarding. So there is some checking, but we just thought maybe tighten it up a bit, get a bit more evidence of it, and also bring in the 3-year recheck process as well. We thought that would tighten it up a little bit more. So it wasn't saying that there was no checking of the DBS part of things. It was just sort of tighten it up a bit further. That's sort of where we were coming from.
Okay. Is that your last question? Perfect. Thanks very much. I think that sorry about the technical trouble that we've had, David, and but thanks for doing. I think we've got to it where we needed to be at the end. I think that then takes us on to our next item, which is next appendix rather, which is the migration team report.
Okay. Migration team. The audit concluded a substantial rating. The review found clearly well-defined London Strategic Migration Programme Board objectives, properly approved through the terms of reference and agreed with partners. Monitoring arrangements are operating effectively. The London Strategic Migration Partnership Board receives regular updates at quarterly meetings with progress reported against each objective, including issues and barriers. Detailed reporting also takes place through the London Strategic Migration Partnership Board insight reports, the business delivery plans and financial returns which are required as part of the Home Office grant. We found effective financial control with budgets monitored closely, regular engagement with the finance business partners and accurate returns being submitted to the Home Office. Partnership arrangements are in place involving a wide range of London-wide and national stakeholders. The London Strategic Migration Partnership operates under a signed grant agreement with the Home Office, supported by detailed outcome schedules. Finally, roles and responsibilities within the migration team are clearly defined. Meetings and reporting structures are well organised and documented. In summary, no risk or improvement actions are identified during this review.
Thanks very much. I mean, substantial assurance and no actions required. So I don't think we have any questions on that, really. Thanks very much, Mark. So I think we can move on to our next bit, which is the London Resilience Audit Report, for which we're joined online by Toby Gould. Mark, do you want to lead off?
Okay, London Resilience. This audit concluded a reasonable assurance rating. Overall, London Resilience has a sound governance and partnership framework in place, and the arrangements to prepare for and respond to emergencies broadly meet the requirements of the Civil Contingencies Act. The London Resilience Unit operates within a clearly defined and approved framework, including the London Resilience Strategy, several well-established emergency planning protocols, and a wide partnership network is in place. Roles and responsibilities are clearly allocated, and the GLA has structures in place for strategic coordination, public communications, and community resilience. Oversight arrangements are in place with regular reporting through the London Resilience Forum, the Resilience Committee, the London Resilience Programme Board and the GLA's Oversight Committee. Accurate and timely management information underpins decision-making. We identified 3 areas that require improvement. The GLA Corporate Business Continuity Plan has not been approved or communicated, despite being a statutory duty under the Civil Contingencies Act. This poses a risk to the GLA's ability to operate safely during an incident. 4 earlier recommendations made by DARA relating to business continuity remain outstanding and will require follow-up. The GLA Director of Finance has draft documents in development, and progress on this activity will be monitored and reported through the GLA's Internal Resilience Committee. Communication on London Resilience is available to the public on the GLA website. However, awareness on accessibility is not clearly defined for the public to know about the existence of the GLA website. And finally, training for gold officers needs some improvement. Some of the newly onboarding gold officers have not yet received core training or shadowing requirements, which could affect their readiness during emergencies. That's the main findings. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that, Toby, before we go to any questions.
No, thank you. Happy to go straight to questions.
Great. I mean, I suppose my question is, it sort of feels like this is quite an important area, and it sort of had got a bit stuck in the long grass, but is possibly now being dragged out of the long grass. I don't know if that's a fair assessment. How come it sort of ended up getting a bit stuck? I suppose that's my question, really.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by stuck in the grass, but just if everyone's not aware, or if not everybody is aware, so London's resilience arrangements were supported by 2 separate teams for a period of years, one hosted by the London Fire Commissioner and one in the Greater London Authority. So in following a mayor's decision in June 2024, those teams were merged and brought into one place, the London Resilience Unit, as we know it now, in the GLA. The GLA has, throughout that period, always had its responsibilities as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act. So those were supported by a much smaller team in the GLA up until that period, June 2024. Now we are a larger, it hasn't grown overall, but it is now all within the single unit in the GLA. There is, I suppose there's more scope to support those arrangements moving forward in the GLA. Does that answer your question? Is that where you were getting at or looking to get to?
I think so. I suppose what I was picking up was the fact that obviously it's a thing that needs to be reviewed and looked at regularly, and it just seemed to have not quite happened. But you're satisfied that you're on top of it. No.
Yes, I think somewhere in the report, I think it talks about the fact that there are 108 different risks in the London Risk Register, or otherwise known as the Community Risk Register, London's version of that. We have to take a balanced and a proportionate approach to that. We can't do all the planning, all the preparation we would want to do for each one of those 108 different risks. So our arrangements as the GLA and as a resilience partnership are based on based on the arrangements set out in the Civil Contingencies Act. So we do look at some specific very high risks, but largely we develop generic arrangements to be able to respond to and recover from emergencies regardless of the nature. As a resilience partnership, and a resilience partnership that is led by the GLA and supported by London Resilience Unit, that gives us, I think, 28 different frameworks, so documents that set out how we respond to emergencies, and there's a further half a dozen that are actually still led by the London Fire Commissioner because they relate to major accident hazards that are a natural fire and rescue service need. Across that whole spectrum, and the risk register itself, and all the other supporting documents and policies and things you might expect, we work on the basis of a 3-year review cycle. That's a sort of maximum of 3-year review cycle. But as hopefully I've sort of alluded to, there is a lot of work there. We could do more work in almost every area of resilience if resources were never ending, but there has to be a balanced and proportionate approach. What I would say about some of the specific findings in the report then, where things have fallen outside of that 3-year review cycle, that won't have been accidental. It will have been a pragmatic solution. Actually, that, I think I'm quoting one in the report, that learning and improvement policy that is not within that 3-year review cycle, it's because it was deprioritised, because there wasn't considered to be much of a need to develop or review or refine that. So it's still on the to-do list, balanced against those other priorities. And just if it wasn't clear, the business continuity planning aspect doesn't sit within London Resilience Unit. So I think there's another colleague, or there was due to be another colleague on the line if you specifically wanted to talk about that part.
Yes, Peter is firing up. Thanks very much, David. Yeah, Peter is in the room and he's firing up his microphone as we speak.
Thank you. And I'm conscious again that I'm speaking on behalf of Faye as the owner of the business continuity plan. So, the first thing to say is that we absolutely accept the finding, and the deadline to meet this audit risk will be met. I think we've said it at September 2026, but I just wanted to say a couple of things about this. So I think in terms of the scope of the work, what we're talking about are GLA staff who are based in this building and also in Union Street. We recognise that other functional bodies have their own business continuity plans, and those are slightly different on the basis that they will run frontline services and the GLA doesn't. And so because the GLA doesn't run front-facing public services, we think that our operational risks are inherently slightly lower. And therefore our continuity plans need to be slightly different in scale. So when we think about this, we've got two significant risks. One is around kind of cyber attack and loss of access to IT systems, and the other is around loss of access to the actual physical office space. And we've already got plans in place for that and mitigation. So we've got existing plans around cyber risk, which we can touch on a bit more. And in terms of home and hybrid working arrangements, those are pretty well embedded across the organisation. So while we recognise that there's work to do to sort of formally approve the business continuity plan, we do feel fairly confident that in the event that those risks take place, hopefully a fairly unlikely risk, that we'd be able to mitigate those based on existing plans. But that being said, we do know that this plan is important, testing it is important, and I think as colleague mentioned, there's some draft plans that need to come together, and then we'll be able to meet that, the deadline for this risk in September.
Thanks very much. Actually, before we move on, can I just welcome on my information sheet here to the public gallery students from Pardies House Primary School in Barnet. Is that correct? Welcome, hello. You find us discussing how in London we deal with natural disasters and emergencies. I realise the tone of the discussion might not quite sound as dramatic as that. Alex, I think you had a question on this.
To be honest, I think you sort of covered it in your opening.
Okay.
Too much.
Kripesh?
Just a question about the what's quoted in the document on page 12 as part of the action plan about the resourcing constraints, which has limited the pace at which you can move forward. Given what's happened with the TfL hack and the growing concerns, obviously, on cybersecurity that there is worldwide, what are you doing to ensure that we are getting the resources that we need to make the changes that we need to?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that's addressed to me.
I think, yeah, if you could start and then maybe move to Peter, who answered under this theme.
Thank you. Cyber is, it's more than one, I should say, of the 108 risks that I mentioned earlier in the risk register. It's a whole cluster of different cyber risks that could affect different public services and critical services, public, private, across the UK, so in London. Cyber is one of those specific risks or cluster of risks for which the Resilience Partnership has a response framework, so a document that details how, as a Resilience Partnership, we will come together and coordinate the response to a cyber emergency that affects. There are some thresholds involved. It's not every cybersecurity incident. It is a cybersecurity incident that probably affects at least multiple organisations, if not multiple sectors, and therefore meets the threshold as requiring the need for the response to be coordinated. across the Resilience Partnership. So that's one of the areas of risk that we do invest in. We have a framework that is reviewed within every 3 years. It's based on national guidance and good practice or leading practice that we see elsewhere around the UK in terms of our approach. It's informed by relevant government agencies who are involved in the response to a larger scale incident of that nature. And it's part of our training and exercising programme and the arrangements that we invest in from our perspective of supporting the Resilience Partnership. I can't really talk about our cybersecurity or business continuity in relation to IT services within the GLA itself, but just on the last point, to mention that we do, of course, have our own business continuity plan in place within London Resilience Unit. It covers the same sort of points that my colleague mentioned earlier in terms of denial of access to premises, IT communication systems, and a shortage of personnel, in effect, depending on what the nature of the disruption is.
Peter, do you want to come in?
Just to add, so I should say the GLA mayor budget, as we call it, the specific budget for the GLA for next financial year was published yesterday, and hopefully members of the committee will be able to see that. And within that, there is some additional investment within the London Resilience Unit to make sure that the unit is properly staffed and properly trained and has access to the right digital systems as well. So that is recognised within the GLA's budget for next year.
So would that, obviously, so these papers would have been drafted before that, so would there be a change in anything you put in this paper if you were to publish it today?
In terms of the internal audit report?
Yeah, in terms of the action plan.
Not in terms of the action plan, but I think it just speaks to the wider point about investment in the team so that we can make sure that we are resourced to meet the requirements that are set out in the plan.
Okay. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is resourcing is mentioned as an issue as to, so on the further comments section as a reason why the quote is that because of due to resourcing constraints which have limited the pace at which this can move forward. Does that, well, what you're saying now with the additional funding coming through in the GLA mayor budget yesterday, does that make a difference to that comment?
It should make a difference, but I think there's also a wider point within that, which I think Faye would say if she was here, which is there have been some resource constraints, I think, at more senior levels. But I think we're now in a position where we can move forward and we're committed to meet the deadline for the refresh of the plan in September.
Sure, and linked to resourcing, so looking at the next page in the papers on communication to the public. So there is mention again in the further comments about the rollout of training for all relevant GLA personnel and the additional resource implication which LRU, so the London Resilience Unit resources, will find it challenging because of the GLA's savings and efficiency programmes. So what is being done to make sure that we are prepared in the event of an emergency?
So I think as mentioned, sorry, do you want to go? You go.
I was going to ask if you wanted me to comment on that one. Yeah, the savings and efficiencies programme proposals, they do include proposals to cut 2 posts in total. So it's actually removing 7 posts and replacing them with 5. So an overall cut of 2 posts from London Resilience Unit, which is somewhere in the mid-40s in terms of our normal staffing capacity. So yes, we are expected to face some reduction in resources as per those savings and efficiencies proposals. And then I would just say I'm not up to speed on the budget announcements yesterday, so if that could lead to a change there. But really just on that point, they have been designed, so the proposals for those cuts in London Resilience Unit have been designed in a way that should protect our operational response arrangements and our resourcing of our statutory services.
So in terms of reassurance to the public, can you assure us that what you have in place will make sure that the public are prepared in the event of an emergency?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I probably can't say much about the Savings and Efficiencies programme itself, but just quoting from the consultation document on that, we have been clear in that consultation document that operational constraints have been protected, including a minimum level of resourcing required to maintain 24/7 coverage and ensure shifts are staffed without excessive reliance on overtime or a small number of individuals. So based on that assessment that's included in the Savings and Efficiencies proposals, then I think that's a yes in terms of an answer to your question.
Okay, sure. Sorry, just going back one step as well to the business continuity plan. Will a hard deadline be set on its ratification? Peter?
So the audit report talks about that being ratified by September of 2026, and we're committed to meet that deadline.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Alex, you had a question on this?
Yeah, just very briefly, because this is overlap with some of the work that we've done on oversight, where obviously Assembly Member Harani's already referenced the business continuity plan, and that wasn't referenced at all when we had, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was the key coordinators at the time. But obviously we've had that reassurance on the hard deadline of September 26. Is there a particular reason why it couldn't be sooner, given that there's been quite a significant lag between when it was the first draft has come out and September 26?
If I'm honest, apologies.
If you don't know, that's
I'm
okay.
Not, I
you're
don't
not,
know.
You're not.
But
okay.
I've been given assurances by Faye and colleagues that that deadline will be met.
Okay. All right. Just because this is extremely out of step with what we've been told already in oversight. So when I've read this report earlier, it did jump out at me, but I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it on that item. So that, I think David, remote David, I think you're welcome to. I'm afraid David Esling's going to have to stick around a bit longer, but thanks very much, David, for joining us on that item. We now move on to the Royal Docks follow-up report.
Yeah, we've got two follow-up reports. This is the Royal Docks follow-up review. We originally reviewed the Royal Docks in September 2025 and concluded a substantial assurance rating. One management action was agreed, which related to the documentation of decisions and actions at the officer level Enterprise Zone Programme Board. In this follow-up review, we have again concluded a substantial assurance, and the one agreed action has been fully implemented. Reporting packs are now produced for all officer level Enterprise Zone Programme Board meetings, including documented minutes, actions with responsible officers, and the record of decisions taken. The packs are also made available, publicly available, with restricted sections handled appropriately. There are no further risks identified and no additional recommendations arising from this follow-up.
Thanks. Well, it's good news, because last time they were here, there were all sorts of problems. Or last time we looked at this, rather, all sorts of problems, and now all those problems seem to be solved. Although I will say, all of the material in the docks appear to have sunk since we had a previous report. I spent a morning looking out my window watching frogmen and a sort of sea crane lift all of the sunken bits back out of the dock, but I'm sure it will be back soon, stronger than ever. I don't think I have any questions on this. Anybody else? Nope. Okay, that takes us to external relations.
Okay, the external relations follow-up review. We originally reviewed external relations in December 2024 and provided a substantial assurance rating with one management action agreed. We have again concluded with a substantial assurance rating with the one agreed management action fully implemented. We found that a formal record is now maintained for the budget monitoring meetings between the finance business partner and the external relations team. These records capture updates, agreed actions, and help to ensure accountability. No further risks were identified during this review, and no further actions are required.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have any questions on this one. Anybody else? Nope. I think that brings us then, in that case, to the end of item 5. So can I ask the panel to note the contents of recent internal audit reports attached to the reports at appendices 1 to 7 and approve the GLA Internal Audit Plan 2026-27. Perfect. Okay. Item 6, Corporate Risk Register. Are there any points members wish officers to consider ahead of the next 6-monthly refresh and update? Okay. In that case, can I ask the panel to note? Oh, yep. Fire away.
It was just risk number 3 was that we failed to create and sustain the environment our workforce needs to thrive. Obviously, there's a number of restructuring, cost savings and redundancies that are proposed. So just in light of that, how is that going to be kept in mind?
Sorry, bear with me. So just on that point, we recognise that there is significant change in the GLA, more change than there has been in recent times as a result of the efficiency programme. But I think one of the things that's probably worth flagging is just the programme of support that's available to staff at this point. So the consultation has been set out, and there's been a significant amount of support available both from individual teams, but also from people services as a whole, and those offers have been made clear to the organisation. I think there's been regular briefing, regular communication, and we've tried as best as possible in the context of this kind of environment to offer support, particularly for well-being for staff. And I think certainly in my experience relative to other public sector organisations I've worked in, it's been pretty comprehensive, but we still have to manage that on the basis that within the GLA this isn't as usual as it might have been in other public organisations that have been used to austerity for a number of years.
Yeah, definitely is a difficult moment for a number of staff here at the GLA. Thank you.
Thanks. So in that case, can I ask the panel to note the corporate risk register? Item 7 is expenses and taxable benefits. So can we... we now move on to monitoring the expenses, taxable benefits for the mayor, elected members and senior staff. Do members have any questions or comments? Okay, in that case, can we note the taxable benefits and expenses incurred by the mayor, London Assembly members and senior staff during the period 1st of April to the 31st of April 2025 to the 31st of January 2026? Item 8 is annual report of the monitoring officer regarding complaints about elected members. Do members have any questions or comments on that? Okay, can we note the report? Item 9, we now move on to the Register of Gifts and Hospitality for the Mayor of London, London Assembly members. Do members have any questions or comments? Okay, can we... you're getting ahead there, Alex. On the basis that there are no questions, can we note the report? Noted. Well done, well noted. Item 10, Register of Gifts and Hospitality for members of staff. Do members have any questions or comments? Then can we note the report? Excellent. We're now, the end is nigh. So the date of the next meeting of the panel will be confirmed, or indeed the existence of the panel will be confirmed at the annual meeting of the London Assembly in May 2026. There is no urgent business, so thank you very much, everyone. The meeting is now closed.